Welcome back to the Property Management Show, where we deep dive into property management and entrepreneurship. Your hosts are Marie Hespen and Brittany Jones, formerly Stephens, and we are both from 4.5 Marketing Agency. Since 2012, 4.5 has helped hundreds of property managers like you get more owner leads through digital marketing. Whether you need help with a website, social media, SEO, online reputation, video and blog content, or pay-per-click advertising like Google Ads, we can do it all. Visit 4andhalf.com to get your business growing today. That's FOURANDHALF.com. So we recently had a conversation with Ray Hespen, the CEO of Property Meld and also its co-founder. Now, in typical fashion, we talked so much and covered a lot of ground that we had to split this interview into 2 episodes. And so this is part 1, where we talk about what maintenance analytics is, why it's important, and most importantly, what it can do for a property management business. Let's go ahead and listen to the interview. Ray, welcome back to the show for, I think, your 7th episode?
Thank you. So you've done the math. How many times have I been on this show?
This is your 7th time. You're a veteran.
Gosh, dang. I don't know what's wrong with you guys that you get me on for 7 times, but really thrilled to be back, by the way, Marie and Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Well, technically, we've had you for less, but our conversations typically go like long and like we go into so much stuff that we end up slipping as cutting the episodes into halves because there's just so much per conversation. So that might happen in this episode too. Who knows?
My mom always said I like to talk a lot, so you're basically just validating her. We're not gonna share this with her then.
No.
That would be right.
No. Or maybe I could just like do this excerpt, send it to Drea, and then she can do.
Oh no, I'm gonna track your mom down and send her all.
Oh, please don't.
Maybe we can make like a montage or something.
But yeah, I think it's a good idea. Thinking outside the box, Brittany. Please don't.
I will.
Great. Well, Ray, I know that you and your team have been very busy this year. Do you want to kind of share a little bit about what you guys have been working on?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're super thrilled about is, the industry is continuing to evolve into like this more sophisticated nature of like how to run maintenance operations. And one of those things that everybody's just craving for is more and more information to make data-driven decisions as opposed to gut feel, qualitative analysis. Like how do we make decisions based on quantitative or numerically driven? And then how do we keep doing that throughout the entire year, multiple years to move a needle as an organization? And so one of the things we've been really thrilled about, we collect data, anonymized data on, hundreds of thousands of maintenance units, millions of service issues. And so we're actually very close to starting to surface that information that I think is going to completely transform how people run the maintenance part of their business in property management, which we're super excited about.
That's really exciting. And I know one of the phrases or terms that your team has been using is maintenance analytics, which sounds very technical. And so to our listeners who may not have an inkling as to like what exactly that means, can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Well, marketing comes up with like the cool words for what we call things, but basically what maintenance analytics, maintenance insights, as we also call it, admittedly, I don't even know what it's called. I should. It's dropping soon. Is this concept of allowing any operator to, at a pretty granular level, understand how they're doing on their ladder of maintenance excellence. So if you've seen us before, we've talked about this concept of like, how do you think about maintenance? One thing has to happen before the next one and so on. And so we're going to start providing pretty immense visibility into a maintenance operation. How's my communication in my organization? How's my scheduling efficiency? How's my staffing efficiency? How's my preventative? And so we're starting to actually surface some of the information we've been collecting over the years. So we've got a new product coming out that's going to be broadly available to our customer base, with even further stuff coming down the road to being like, if you want to get really into the weeds and say, I want to move this particular KPI that's super important to my business. I need to know, how do I need to engage my vendors better? How do I need to engage my technicians? How do I need to engage my coordinators? And allows you to like really deep dive to have a very pointed plan of attack about improving, basically your business. And so that's, think about it as, if you were to go into your bank account and go, what am I spending all my money on? Have you ever been part of your bank account and it's like, oh, you're going to this much rent, this much is in gasoline, this much is at brunch, and you sit there and go, I really need to cut down my brunch budget. Without having that visibility or insights into your spending, it makes it very difficult to make decisions. So we're basically bringing that to the maintenance world for property management.
That's really interesting. And what I really latched on to this when I first heard about it was the ability for business owners to make data-driven decisions, because a lot of other industries have, kind of figured this out, like using data to inform decisions. And it's really exciting that this is about to happen for property management. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit more about like analytics and the different types of analytics, because I feel like analytics is such a big word and it can actually mean different things, and it can help you do different things depending on what kind of data you have. So I like to think of it as like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So at the very bottom, we have like descriptive analytics, which is, you just monitor what's going on. And then it goes up to like diagnostic, to predictive, to prescriptive. Prescriptive is like the self-actualization, where the data literally just doesn't present itself. It literally says, okay, you do this, right? So from the very bottom of like, hey, this is what's going on, to the top, which is like, okay, given everything, all the data, this is what you should do, business owner. Like, where is the property management industry now?
So super good question. I really like that. I wrote that down: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive, which I think is really great. The way that we probably tend to look at insights is you start with lagging. Everybody's familiar with lagging. Oh, like my lease renewal rate is or a lagging indicator, or my resident satisfaction is a lagging indicator, right? Those are lagging. But there's things that'll actually tell you if it's going good or going poorly, or what are those numbers going to do? And those are leading indicators. And then there's behaviors, like ultimately what behaviors can you do to basically give you a good leading, which will give you a good lagging. So I look at it a little bit differently. But in property management maintenance, I think we've gotten really honed in on what are really good lagging indicators. So speed of repair is a big one. It's a big one for resident satisfaction. It's a good indicator for vendor sourcing. It's a big indicator for a lot of reasons. Resident sat is another one. We've actually got what we're starting to come up with, which is like a vendor health score, like how good are your vendors doing, tech utilization rate, and then your annual spend per unit in maintenance annually. And all those are really good indicators around quality and efficiency. And so these are the big ones we're starting to manage and track and say, you now have this information to like start looking at this. And then what we do is then we focus on analytics and insights and be like, what are all the leading indicators that contribute to those big ones, right? So if I'm somebody and I'm trying to talk to my maintenance coordinator and I'm sitting there going, maintenance coordinator, I need you to get my speed of repair down from this number to this number. What does a maintenance coordinator do? So you have to get numbers and metrics that says, how's your communication? How's your scheduling? What's the breakdown? Where's it breaking down at? And like be able to say, in order to get my speed of repair down, I need to get my speed to assign to a better spot because it's killing me. So those leading indicators are what we start to funnel down throughout our insights and analytics. And again, without geeking out too hard, the ability to sit there and go, all right, which vendors am I really strong in? Do I need more handyman, plumbers, other HVAC techs, whatever that might be, to be able to do it granularly. So we look at it as these big lagging, and then leading metrics is what we're ultimately doing. But kind of the over
Mhm.
view of it all.
Yeah, so it sounds a lot like the lagging indicators are kind of like the descriptive. They just tell you like, okay, well, this is the, like the speed of the repairs. But then what you were saying is like, right, the leading indicators kind of like help you identify what's going on higher up the river, right? So so it's like more of like, okay, what's going to happen in the future if this is happening right now? So those are more like the predictive ones. But then out of curiosity, would you say that every single property management company has the same suite or set of lagging indicators that they should look at, and leading indicators that are connected to those lagging indicators?
So by and large, if you think about property management, our job is to drive NOI, right? Like, so, if we think about it, we bring somebody on, whether we're third party or whether we manage our own assets, our job is to drive a return on that rental property really well. There's only two ways you can do it. You can bring in rent and make sure that that's optimized, and there's going to be costs associated with the property, and your job is to keep those down. And so, yeah, those 5 indicators are all pretty good indicators to say, hey, how are we doing at keeping our residents happy and the renewals going? And how good are we at keeping our costs low? So I would say by and large, yes. The biggest challenge has historically been, Marie and Brittany, has been around figuring out what leading indicators impact what lagging. I'll even tell you, it probably wasn't even that long ago, 2 to 3 years ago, I think we were the ones that really came out and created the strongest correlation between speed of repair and resident satisfaction from like an analytical standpoint. And to us, that was a pretty big breakthrough because we had a lot of people in the industry going, it's about personal touch. It's about how you answer the phone. It's about this. It's like, I'd love to say it's about any of that, but residents just actually want their stuff fixed. And so then you had to start going through and going, well, what else impacts speed of repair? What impacts my invoice prices? What impacts my owner retention? What impacts this? And so we've spent a lot of years actually just trying to figure out what are the right metrics to go and say these are true leading that our customers can really jump into and move ultimately to make their business really solid. And so I think that's been what a lot of the work has been, and most likely will continue to be, because there's so many oddities in data that make you sit there and kind of scratch your chin a little bit and go, why is this impacting this? But I think historically, the industry hasn't had a lot of data to ultimately even start the conversation about what impacts what.
Just interesting. So you mentioned that the lagging indicators, given that most property management companies are kind of exist to deliver NOI to their owners, these lagging indicators that you mentioned are pretty core, but that the challenge is identifying what leading indicators affect that. Are there kind of core leading indicators that you've observed, consistently affect the lagging indicators that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I'll even go to a weird one. There were customers when we were first talking about like annual maintenance spend per unit, and there was a lot of confusion around that's like institutional owner operator stuff. Like, why would we care about that metric? But we have around 500,000 units on our platform and around 275,000 investors and owners. And so we were able to even like look at landlord investors, owning between 1 and 4 properties. And the strongest correlation came down to maintenance spend per unit. And as a percentage of rent roll, like it starts to become a big deal that if a customer wants to hang on to investors longer, you have to find a way to keep maintenance costs down. So in a very, very weird, sick way, maintenance spend per unit is a lagging, but it's also a leading for owner retention, which is why it's on there, right? It's important for those institutional or people that are owner operators, but it's also really important for those that service a client base. There's very strong statistical correlations to that, and we've done some podcasts and stuff on that. But so you go in like further down the rabbit hole, and like I'll give you some ones that I feel like are pretty strong correlations. So really good leading indicators to speed of repair is understanding how long it takes you from the time you were given a work request to the time you assign it. How fast from the time you assign it to the time you schedule the completion. All those things, like, it's a huge black box if you don't know where the process is breaking down, to sit there and go, here's industry best practice, here's industry standard, by the way, yours is triple that length. That is a great way that you can have a meaningful impact on a metric or a leading indicator that ultimately is going to anticipate your speed of repair. I don't know if that's geeking out too hard on it, but as an example.
No, that's really good. I think when it's inside a black box, it's easy to blame, well, it was a long weekend, I couldn't get a tech out, and then it's like, oh, but like outside of that, it was still delayed by a week in addition to the long weekend, stuff like that kind of add up, but it's not visible to you because you're not actually tracking the number. It's interesting.
Right.
Or it's the opposite, right? Where stuff's getting done super quickly, but they're not tracking it properly.
Yeah. And we've kind of got a way to that. We kind of looked at this, right? Because, like, how do you visualize data to drive action? So I'll start like very high level fundamentals, like in how we think about information. The first job of data is to motivate. Like, do I need to get better or focus on this thing or not, or I'm winning and I need motivation, right? The second one is correlating cause and effect relationships. So which things impact what things? That's the second job of data. And third job of data in this order is to be accurate. It's obviously important, but a lot of people think accurate data is the key. It's like, no, you have to like motivate, you have to show correlations, and then be accurate. I'm not saying don't be accurate. But so whenever we were looking at this information, like, we were sitting there saying, like, all right, there's a ton of information here. We want our customers to be able to take action to drive for results. And so as you look at anything or any piece of data, it's one, is this good or bad? Like, it's really interesting. We've got, some financial metrics that we're starting to surface. And what's crazy is we'll have our customers get beat up by, say, an institutional investor back. Why'd you pay this much for that? And it's like, what information do you even have to say if that's good or bad? You know what's going up.
It costs
everything
money.
in the market's going up.
So that's why it's
yeah, here it is. And so if people don't know if it's good or bad, yeah, exactly. If you don't know what's good or bad, then you have no leg to stand on to like have a conversation about, why is a hot water heater costing X, right? Is this good or bad? The second one, is it getting better or worse? So are you trending in the right direction, right? Because if we make changes in any of our business, we don't have to see it immediately fixed. We just have to know we're going in the right direction. And the third one, how quickly is it changing, right? And the analogy that I use, and I'm going to give bad analogies throughout this, but if you think about how much fuel you have in the gas tank of the vehicle, assuming you're not, and maybe or charging your battery if you drive electric, that tells you, like, all right, here's how much I have. I have 73% battery or 73% of my gas tank fill. The next piece that's really important is, like, how fast are you consuming fuel or energy? And the reality is, right, like, if it's going bad very quickly, and say you're starting to drain 10% of your battery every minute, and I'm giving a terrible example, that means pump the brakes, something's drastically wrong. I need to find a charging station now. But if you don't have that piece of information, then you can sit there and drive and run on the side of the road and rely on somebody to pull you to safety. So that's why those three kind of ways of looking at information are really important, because without, are you doing good or are you doing bad? Is it getting better or worse? And how quickly is it getting better or worse? It makes it very difficult to anticipate problems, or what do you need to focus on as a business owner that's going to bite you in the rear even a month from now.
I really like those three little tidbits about like how you should look at data. And it's just a really good segue to my next question. So collecting data is something that everyone keeps talking about, like, oh, are you collecting this, collecting that? But it's useless if you're not planning to act on the information. And so what do you think are the most common reasons property management company owners or business owners in general are having that prevents them from acting on data that they may already have?
So I'll start out by saying your data is only as good if you're like for like comparing with other data from somebody else. Like, because the whole thing is, right, if I sit there and say my invoice prices are really good, but let's say I'm not factoring in labor because I've decided to do that for some reason, and say my average hot water heater costs are really low, but you talk to somebody else and I'm like, wow, mine are a lot higher. And there's no way to actually, you have to like for like data comparison. And that's one of the biggest challenges. Everybody has to measure it the same way or else it becomes useless. Because again, good or bad, you don't know if it is good or bad. So one of the biggest challenges has been an agreed to process in what people define as information. I'll give you a perfect example. If I ask an operator what's their turnover time, I will get varying degrees of answers purely on what they define as the turnover time. Is it the time where a renter is moved out? Is it the time when the turnover process starts? Does it end when the turnover process is complete? Does it end when the renter is in the unit and a post-move-in inspection is complete? And so the biggest challenge historically has been nobody's agreed to definitions and is not collecting data and sharing data in that specific way. And so that's one of the unique things about Property Meld is because we've automated a lot of things. And so we've automated a lot of the data collection that is like for like with customers. And so it becomes easy to be able to do that. But that's one of the biggest challenges to being able to review your own data is if your numbers aren't measured or captured or documented in the same way, again, if you don't know if it's good or bad, you don't, like, what do you do? So anyways, that's one of the largest challenges of data in property management right now, definitions and capturing.
I think that's a really great analogy because, back in, say, 2017, even profitability in property management was poorly understood, right? And it took for Daniel Craig to kind of be like, hey, everyone's defining profitability differently. And then you have business owners saying like, I'm making bank on property management, but actually they're mingling real estate profitability and property management profitability and thinking it's my profitability. And it's like they don't give themselves a salary, so they're super profitable. But then when you put every company through the same filter, then it became obvious like, oh, people weren't as profitable as they thought. Or like, hey, like you're not supposed to commingle the two sides of your business because then how do you know if you're losing money in one? And it's really interesting because it's like it took like so long to even agree for people to agree to be like, hey, maybe we should have accounting standards so we can all kind of compare apples to apples. And so only now is it starting to happen, I guess, in maintenance.
Yeah, and that's a perfect analogy. And accounting has been around since I don't even know how long, but like the Romans were doing accounting. Like we haven't reinvented the wheel. Like just standardizing is such a big delta that now imagine people haven't been capturing it before and they're trying to standardize. It makes for a very large mountain to climb to say, hey, this information's all there. And kind of the last thing to your question, your original question about like data and like, we actually spent more time figuring out what things are not valuable. And like, we had to find ways to chop stuff. There's too much information. And what to focus on becomes really important. I think that's one of the other challenges that people have is if you don't have enough data to build cause and effect relationships, you can just surface a million things and nothing tells you anything. You don't have a maintenance coordinator focusing in this area. You don't have a broker owner doesn't know if one's red and one's green, which one actually matters. And that's the other challenge with data and a lot of it.
That's really good insight. And as you mentioned earlier, right? Like in your in one of the stuff that you talked about what the job is of data, you said first is to motivate, the second is to find correlations. cause and effect, and the third is to be accurate. And accuracy is the third because it's so easy to get caught up in being perfectionistic with your data. Like, oh, I need to make sure I capture all the data. I need to make sure that every single piece of data is living here without even a plan for what you're going to use it for, right? And so you end up not actually doing anything with it because you're just so gung-ho and getting the perfect data. When you could have just collected 5 pieces of data, but then you were gung-ho about collecting the 50 that you could have.
So I'll tell you, as much as I'd love to say I came up with those 3, I didn't.
No.
There's a great podcast out. It's called Correlations of Human Behavior and Data. And they actually demonstrated this by, if you think about a scale at home, Americans were very used to being like, I'm going to sit there and go and New Year's Day resolutions. All right, I got, the COVID-5 or whatever. And so we're sitting there going, but they actually did studies where they actually took the number away because the scale is highly accurate, but it doesn't actually tell you if you're doing a good job or not and if you're getting better. It just tells you a number. And so now they did a scale ultimately where instead of showing you a number, they would do a trend because the body fluctuates. And it would say either you're going down quickly or going down a little bit, you're breaking even, you're going up, or you're going up a lot. And they would actually have that scale, and I forget what it was, that scale would end up prompt to, here's the behaviors that are driving that. And the people that had the scale that didn't tell them the number actually lost more weight in the case study because they knew how to move the weight and they knew that the number was getting better. And so they eliminated accuracy of data completely from that scenario. And ultimately people got the results that they wanted out of it. And so, anyways, kind of as an example to the point there, the number isn't as special as what do you do with it? Is it good or bad? And is how do you move it? Then it is the perfection of the number.
I really like that. And thank you for, sharing the source so our listeners can check out the full podcast and geek out if they want to. And then, speaking of like data and analytics, I understand that it's very important to understand like the data, but I also understand that like action is important. So I know in my 8+ years of like working in, property management, marketing, helping, property managers create content, they always talk about preventative maintenance. And I know that, Property Meld is also big on preventive maintenance. So how does marketing analytics, marketing insights affect preventative maintenance and how it's done or when it's done?
So I'll first start out by preventative maintenance should impact one number, which is the annual maintenance spend per unit. And it should also impact resident satisfaction. So again, if you think about the top 2, if you do it well, residents are happier because less stuff is breaking or they're without their air conditioning or they're with their air conditioning more. So that's one. And the annual maintenance spend per unit goes down because if you're doing preventative programs effectively, that means you're actually having a meaningful impact on the returns. So again, kind of tying it back in, the correlation between good preventative programs and impacting those two is again, the ability to have information of the efficacy of those programs. We're obviously big proponents of it, gutter cleanings, semi-annual HVAC inspections, semi-annual rent, inspections and all those things. But you should ultimately see a result from those programs and the annual maintenance spend per unit on like-for-like units. So that all being said, there's visibility into the efficacy of your programs. And what's really important, the most important thing is your customers, the property managers, owners should know the efficacy of that program. We know in our industry, the biggest reason why we haven't gotten adoption and say like IoT things, like we know renters like it, all that, but it's like, oh, it's an investment. We lack the data to show, hey, if you do this, here's what happens. And I wouldn't blame an investor for being skeptical. Like, why would I invest $300, $400? Why would I spend $150? But if you make it a math equation and be like, hey, listen, I'm not saying this is going to be your result, but by doing this, you're going to reduce the cost of a failure by 70% this year. And that's statistically $275 by investing $100 and your renter's happier. Okay, this is a no-brainer. And so that's the power of insights in combination with preventative programs that make it really compelling and are ultimately going to lead this industry towards being a much more preventative and predictive group rather than just, come on, we're selling a service. We hope that you believe the value's there. And we hope that you're associating preventative with other things in your life, to being important in maintenance, to being like, here's the case for it for your particular scenario, or why preventative is so important.
I really love that. And as you were talking about that, I was even thinking, marketing hat. Property managers, when they talk to prospective owners, I feel like they also need to kind of prove to the owners, like, if you hire a professional property manager like me, this will happen. If you don't, this other thing will happen. And, it's one thing to be like, oh, why do you need a professional property manager? And then you can list all these things. But if you can show them the data that, like, properties that are managed by a professional like us, or the properties we manage have this many days on market versus self-managed homes in our area. Like, things like that can make it not be an opinion fight, but a data fight. And it's like, well, what's your data to say that you're better at managing it than me? So I like that.
The best people that sell data and statistics are insurance people, right? Especially if you go life insurance. Life insurance is a great one because it's an emotional one, right? You don't have to have it. You're not legally compelled to do it. You just should do it. But all they got to do is sit there and go, how old are you? Oh, interesting. And are you a sole proprietor? Do you know that there is a 1 in whatever, and that chance goes up every year? What would happen in that event, right? And it's data and information. And then all they got to do is give you a line to sign. But they've got information to say it's not impossible. It's actually a very real possibility. And here's the numbers behind that, to where you as a consumer can make like a really good decision, rather than us living in our ultimate optimistic minds that think nothing will ever happen to me. Health insurance folks or life insurance folks, are incredible at this. And you think about most of your other buying stuff, we tend to have information to inform us. If we sit there and look at homes, right? If we just look at a thing, like everybody's got Zillow and Zestimates and like how the appreciation happened and whatever, like the ability to have information to make a decision on spending more or less, we're used to having in other parts of our lives. So owners and investors require something similar.
I love that. Kind of simplify the decision-making process for them by not just relying on pure emotion, because emotion's always going to be there, right? And then when we don't, so the thing is, like, it's psychology. When there's something that we humans don't understand, our brain is scared. And so, like, the worst of us kind of gets in the way of making good decisions, right? And so if you can present data, then it kind of like calms us down, because it convinces us that, like, well, I didn't make a knee-jerk reaction. I didn't just do a gut feel. Like, I considered the data and I made a decision. It's kind of like what Brittany and I always talk about when it comes to reputation. It's like, in the absence of like full understanding of what property managers do, like, people are going to try to pick a property manager based on the data that they understand, which is stars and price. So it's kind of like the same concept. It's like, if you can provide additional data, then you're like, well, I guess I'll go with that guy, that woman. Yeah.
Make it easy. Make it easy for them to make a decision, right?
Okay, so we'll stop right there and save the rest for part 2. But just to give you a little teaser, part 2 will cover the current shortage that we're having with tradespeople, how that is affecting NOI, and what property managers like you can do about it. As a reminder, this podcast is brought to you by 4.5 Marketing Agency. Since 2012, we have helped hundreds of property managers like you grow their businesses by getting more owner leads from digital marketing. Whether you need help with a website, SEO, social media, video and blog content, online reputation, paid advertising like Google Ads, you name it, we can do it. Visit 4andhalf.com to learn more and get started on growth today. That's FOURANDHALF.com. If you have any feedback or questions or suggestions, go ahead and email marketing@4andhalf.com so that we can hear from you. And if you're liking this show, go ahead, show us some love by leaving a review on your favorite podcast app. Thank you, and see you next time for part 2.